Om Adhyayantu Mangani Vaktanashtakshashkotram Atabalamidhyani Sarvani Sarvam Brahmo Panisharam Maham Brahma Nirakayam Mama Brahma Nirakaro Anirakayanamayastu Anirakayanamayastu Taratmani Nirate Upanishad Dharma Ste Mai Santu Te Mai Santu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May all my limbs grow strong, so also my breath, my speech, eyes, ears, and all my organs. All is Brahman, of which the Upanishads speak. May I never turn away from Brahman. May Brahman never turn away from me. Let there be no turning away, at least on my side. I am engaged in the study of the self. The Upanishads speak of qualities that one must possess to succeed in such a study. May I acquire those qualities. Oh, peace, peace, peace. So we started our study of the Kena Upanishad. Earlier we studied Katha Upanishad and the Isha Upanishad. And so we've done the first couple of verses. It says, the disciple, by whose will is the mind drawn towards its objects? Who makes the vital breath the first sign of life function? Ordained by whom do people utter words? Which God directs the eye, the ear, and the other organs? The teacher, it is Brahman. It, Brahman, is the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, the speech of the speech, the breath of the breath, and the eye of the eye. Therefore the wise, giving up the notion that they are associated with these organs, depart from this world, in other words, renounce this world and become immortal. So this is the first couple of verses that we did. Last week, like I said, it's called Kena Upanishad, because that's the first word of the Upanishad. Kena means by whom. By whom do the senses function? By whose power does the mind work? You know, who created the universe? Who's behind all this? And the answer, of course, is Brahman, or God. Now, the basic fundamental teaching in all the Upanishads and all the Vedic knowledge is simply that there's nothing but God, nothing but Brahman. The things which we perceive are experiences, but underlying those experiences is only Brahman. And this is kind of very difficult to grasp because it's very different from what we experience in everyday life. We look out, we see the world, we see a physical world, we see people, cherishing things, we say, oh, this is reality. And we look within ourselves, and we say, oh, I'm having these various feelings, these various thoughts and desires and so forth. And this is our basic sense of identity for most of us. I have this physical body, which sees the world, which experiences things through the senses, and I have a mind, which reacts to those things, which gains understanding and satisfaction and so forth out of those experiences. And so if you ask anybody who you are, invariably they will say, well, I'm so-and-so, I was born in this state, I was born in this city, I went to this school, I have this job. And this is basically our sense of self, our sense of what we are. But the basic message of the Upanishads and of all the mystics is that underlying, behind that personal self, which is living its personal life and going through its personal experiences, underlying that personal self is the self with a capital S. And this self is none other than Brahman itself. And now, as you know, Brahman is not the personal idea of God. It's not an individual, it's not somebody seated up in heaven, running things. It's the underlying reality of things, which is indescribable, but the closest they come is saying that it's Sat Chit Ananda. existence, consciousness, and bliss. Now that consciousness is who we are. That consciousness as our personal self is identified with the body, with the mind, with various instruments through which it gets certain experiences, through which it can be in this world, through which it can act in the world and experience things and so forth. But that consciousness, in its real nature, is Brahman itself, because there's no other consciousness than Brahman. And everything in this universe, including chairs, tables, everything else, is actually that consciousness in expression. It's like in our mind, if we have a strong imagination, for example, an architect, he can picture a house, he can picture the rooms, he can picture the furniture in the rooms and so forth. All of those things are contained within his consciousness, within his mind, and he creates it. In the same way, this whole universe, in all the beings in this universe, are a creation, a projection of that one consciousness. And it's that one consciousness that's looking through this particular body, seeing through these eyes, understanding things through this mind. That one consciousness is what's doing that, but that consciousness, which is your consciousness, which is seeing, experiencing things through your particular identity, that same consciousness is within everybody else, seeing through every other eye, from insects, animals, everything. Everything is a projection of that consciousness. It's like Brahman, like I said, it's not so much a personal idea of God as it's like the ocean. Out of that ocean, everything else has come. And everything that we are as individuals, we're like waves in that ocean. Every wave has a different size, a different shape. There's some great big waves, some very small waves, some little ripples, but each and every wave is ultimately ocean, is ultimately water. And this is what we are ultimately, is we are water. We're not Brahman, we're not God. As individuals, we become small. We become just a little small wave. But if we go deep enough and realize that, okay, I'm not just this physical body, I'm not just this mind, I'm this pure consciousness. If we go deep, then we discover that this is what we are. And that the body, the mind, the individual life that we're living, this is only a kind of a temporary experience that we go through. And so, but the problem is that almost everybody, we are so hypnotized by the experience that we lose touch with who we are. We lose all memory of what we are. And then we live a life, we have some happiness, some sorrow, some success, some failure, like we go through our daily experiences, but those daily experiences are only part of the experience, and but they're not affecting, they're not what we really are, and they're not the true state of our being. It's like watching a movie. We use this example many times, that you go to the theater, you watch a movie, and in that movie, terrible things may happen. You know, particularly nowadays, cars get blown up, people get shot, all kinds of things going on. But you're just sitting and you enjoy it because you know, I'm just sitting in the theater and I'm watching this movie. As we begin to get a little sense of that attitude towards our life, that this is just a movie, God's movie going on. You know, I'm watching it, I'm actually seated in God all the time. Then you start to live in a completely different state of consciousness, and you find that all the problems, all the worries, all the struggles and sufferings and things that were bothering you, these begin to fade away. And instead, you begin to become aware of an inner joy, an inner presence that's there. As soon as you begin to become aware of that presence within, you really know everything's okay. And you know, this some time ago we read stories from different mystics, kind of just ordinary, everyday mystics. But it's interesting, all of them once they had this experience, said the same thing. There was just a great sense of, oh, everything's okay. You know, the classic example they use in chakra is the snake in the rope. That this goes back to old Taisha, the sages, they lived in the forest. So early morning they're going to take their morning bath, and they step on something and they think it's a snake. Now right away the person's full of fear, full of anxiety, full of worry. Oh, the snake is going to bite me. And I mentioned in India, even today, there's a lot of people die from cobra bites out in the villages because they can't get to the doctor in time. Even though we have venom, anti-venom and things, they have to reach within like 45 minutes, and by the time they bring them from the village, it's too late. So the person steps on something in the dark, he feels, oh, it's a snake, and now comes the terror. Oh, I'm going to die, I'm going to be bit. But yet all the time it's just a rope. And the Shankara says that just like that, we're in this world, and we see terrible things going on. And we may have terrible things, terrible problems going on in our own life. And we're struggling and we're worried, and all the time we know, well, eventually we're going to die. And so it tends to make us very kind of frightened and worried. But then you realize, oh, it's actually God Himself, and I'm actually with God. And I'm actually the child of God, and with God, God's protecting me, God's with me. And then all of your worries cease. It's like all of your fears, anxieties, everything else begin to dissolve as soon as you begin to get back into the proper perspective. And this is what actually kind of spiritual development means. It doesn't mean necessarily going through any kind of drastic, ecstatic experiences or gaining any superpowers or anything like that. It's basically a transformation of consciousness. You begin to see things differently than you did before. You may be having the same job, the same daily routine, the same basic events going on, but everything is now changed because you're seeing it differently. And this is one thing that we don't realize normally, is that the nature of our life, whether we consider it good or bad, whether we consider it happy or unhappy, the nature of our experience is due primarily to the nature of our consciousness. Normally we think all our problems are coming from outside. They're coming from other people, they're coming from the economy, they're coming from this or that, and we're always trying to change something outside. Make the other person behave, make the economy get better, find a better job, like that. We're always kind of trying to put out fires that we're seeing is outside. And we never stop to think that if I'm unhappy, if I have problems, if I have worries, things like that disturb me, the problem is within my own mind and consciousness. Because it's because of my reactions to things that all of the suffering, all of the fear, all the worry, all these things come. Basically, there's an event happens, and that event is pretty much neutral most of the time. But then we attach a value to it. And we say, this is a good event, I like this, and that makes me happy. Or it's a bad event, and I don't like it, so it makes me unhappy. But actually the event itself has very little to do with whether we're happy or unhappy. That happiness, that unhappiness is coming from within ourselves. It's coming from within our own mind, and then we're projecting it out. And so we tend to look at life and say, if life is pleasant, it's good. If it's not pleasant, it's bad. But actually, we don't know. We don't know the ultimate purpose and meaning of things. And the very thing that we consider bad may actually be something good, and vice versa. I think last week I mentioned a famous Chinese story that Swami Varadananda used to quote often, is that there was a farmer, Chinese farmer, and he was very calm, kind of philosophical. And one day his son fell off the horse and broke his leg. And so right away, his wife was saying, oh, that's terrible. She was crying and saying, oh, he broke his leg. What a terrible thing. Then a little bit later, the army came through, and they were drafting everybody to take them off to a war. But because his son had a broken leg, they couldn't take him. So now the wife is saying, oh, that's wonderful. Oh, good. And the farmer said, well, we'll see. And like that, everything, the farmer just said, well, let's see. And so like that, things were going on, and that was it. If you really get attuned properly, start to really sense some special, some connection, you begin to feel that really your life is in the hands of God, and that things are going on as they're meant to do, and all that worry, all that anxiety and things goes away. And you begin to find that you start to become peaceful, calm, you start to become steady, content, happy, and gradually very happy, because you're not holding on. See, out of our mind, out of our mental reactions, we can get a little bit of happiness. Something good happens and it says, oh, that's a joy, we get excited. But underlying these temporary states of joy and sorrow that come to us, there is the presence of the Ananda, the bliss, which is Brahman's very nature. Satchidananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. So the infinite bliss of God is there within us all the time. But simply, we blocked it out. It's like Shama Krishna said, that the breeze of God's grace is always blowing, but you have to unfurl your sails. The sun of God's presence is always there, but simply we've shut it out. And then we're focused on other things. And so gradually, as you begin to, instead of always trying to seek your happiness, your satisfaction, your so forth in the outside, in external things, begin to also become aware of what's inside. And then you begin to, everything begins to get back into proper shape. I remember one of the very first things Swami Varadananda said to me a long time ago was that Divine Mother shows us pictures and we try to grab those pictures. And that's basically what we're doing in life. We're trying to grab onto the experiences that come, and then we are kind of confined to our reactions to those experiences. And in this way, we are totally kind of confined to what we experience, good and bad, reacting to it, good and bad, and so forth. But yet all the time, we're that person, spectator, seated in the theater, watching the movie. And so this is kind of the transition. It starts to be made as you begin to become a little more spiritual, is that shift from being totally dependent on what's outside yourself, or what you're seeing externally, becoming independent of that and more aware of what's actually within yourself. And then you begin to discover the great principle that if you're happy, all your experiences are happy. If you're unhappy, you can have the most wonderful experiences and you'll still be unhappy. And this is what spiritual people, gradually said, they begin to find that happiness within themselves, and then it's with them. And then everything that comes, even what we call problems, even what we call difficulties, even as they come, they're just a game, just something you play with. But you're basically happy. Whereas if you're not happy inside, nothing, no requirement, no money, no anything can actually make you happy. And because it can only bring you kind of what you react to. So this is the basic message, the essential message. In all the Vedanta, he said, there's only God. Everything is God. You're God, they're God, everybody else is God. Cherished tables, everything is in one consciousness. There's a story that with Swami Varadananda, when he was coming to Sri Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna gave him this idea that everything's God, everything's consciousness. And Naran, who's at that time, he said, oh yeah, you're going to tell me these plates and saucers and everything, these are conscious? And then, so Ramakrishna and Swami Varadananda, they had a unique relationship that Ramakrishna would let Narayana argue, because, and so on, and then he'd touch him. And then he'd have the experience. So Ramakrishna then just touched him. And Swamiji said that as he's going on, he saw everything filled with consciousness. And he went by a big kind of a stake that had iron railings. And he said he hit his head against the railings because they seemed to be full of consciousness. And he went home to dinner, and all the plates, cups, everything was full of consciousness. So like that, we don't see that. We're not aware of it, but it's there. And this is what we're trying to do, is to get back into the awareness of who we are, of what we are, and of the actual reality of things. As a human being, as an individual, we can have a human life, and it can be a happy life, a successful life, or it can be also a very miserable life. And even if we're having a basically comfortable life, there are many places in the world where life is just terrible. I mean, things going on in the Middle East now and other places. I think I mentioned last week that when I was in the army, I studied Russian, and all the teachers there were native Russians. They'd all come out of Russia. Usually, many of them came out like World War II or later, but every one of them had just the most terrible stories of what they had gone through. I said one of the teachers had been a concert pianist. He had studied with Shostakovich. He was nobility, he was the neighbors of Tolstoy, but then he ended up in a concentration camp. And the guards there, when they found out he was a concert pianist, they put his hand on a rock and smashed it with a shovel. So his hands were okay. But like every teacher was going through all kinds of, I think here I was, American boy growing up, middle class, or worried about passing the test, or a date for the prom, or this or that. And here's all these people just going through terrible things. So even if you're having a very happy life, got a pleasant life, there are many people who are going through terrible things. And you wonder, how can the good God be responsible for the things that are going on in this world? And then, and the thing is, you can't really figure it out from this level. But it's only when you realize that the world we're seeing, by its very nature, is made up of the pairs of opposites, of good and bad, of pleasure and pain, and so forth. This is how it's built, this is how it functions. And in fact, you can't appreciate good unless you have bad. For example, I remember when I go back to the Army, that I went to the Army, I joined the Army, went through basic training, and basic training was one of the probably the most miserable periods of my life. I heard everyone shouting at you all day, they were making you run around and stab things with a bayonet and all this. It just was not my kind of lifestyle that I was used to. And so it was like 8 weeks and I was completely miserable. Then, from there, I went to this language school. And suddenly, everything was just so wonderful. Basically, because I wasn't in basic training anymore. But it was just so joyous for a long time, just because of what I'd gone through before. So this is kind of how the world works. You get pushed down by suffering, and then when that's gone, then you feel, oh, now life's pretty good. And so in this way, this world that we experience is made up of this, and for souls, which we are, this world is a game. Swami Varadananda said it's a moral gymnasium. We come here in order to struggle with these various real problems and things, like you go to the gym and you work out with weights. And by working out with the weights, you get stronger. In the same way, for the souls, this world is just a game, it's just a challenge, like a football game. I want to go play. And then we go in, we get our brains knocked out, and then we go sit on the bench for a while and say, oh no, I'm going to do it. And so, like that, the soul, it keeps coming back, and until it gets tired of it. And then you begin to be like, well, what is this all about? Who's there? And this is that you begin to change your direction. Back to say, well, who am I? What is God? What is behind all this? And this is that when you begin to make that transformation and realize that you are not confined to the little ups and downs and things that you go through in life, the little problems, that within you is the whole infinite divine presence of God. And as soon as you begin to let that awareness into your consciousness, it begins to function. And then suddenly, instead of life being a continuous series of problems, of difficulties that you have to overcome and struggle with, suddenly it all begins to flow. And you begin to feel that just great sense of, okay, everything's in good hands, and everything's fine. And whether what we call good experiences come or bad experiences, they don't affect you in the same way anymore. Like the bad experiences, they don't disturb you as much, and even the good experiences, they don't excite you as much, because your happiness, your joy is not depending on them anymore. If a good thing comes, you can enjoy it, but if it's not there, you don't miss it. And this is one of the first signs of a little bit of progress, is that you find you don't need anything from outside. He's like a drug addict. He's always needing the drugs. He's always desperate to get the drugs, and it keeps him always kind of off balance. And like when we're depending on our favorite show on TV or dinner or whatever, but whenever we're depending on things, for our happiness, then it's always kind of keeping us off balance. But when you begin to settle back into yourself, then you'll find the finding comes, and then it goes. If it comes fine, you enjoy it. You don't hate it. You don't have to say, oh, everything is terrible. But at the same time, you're no longer dependent on it. I think mention is like for me, it's like TV. If a TV's there, I'll watch it. We don't have any TV here, so I don't see it, and I don't miss it at all. Actually, I think if you've got a TV, the tendency is to sit there for hour after hour and totally waste your whole life. I mean, 50 years of watching TV, and what have you got? So like that, but if it's not there, then I'm not even, don't miss it at all. And so like that, you start to simply get things back into the right perspective. Like I say, it's not necessarily anything real drastic, any fantastic visions or trumpets from heaven or anything going to happen, but as your consciousness changes, your whole experience changes. It may be exactly the same routine, the same job and things you had yesterday, but it's gradually being transformed. And there's like the one Zen master said. He used to go in the morning, he'd have his zazen, he'd sit for the meditation, and then afterwards they'd have a tea break. And he said, every morning, when I come for tea, it's a whole new world. I have to sit in meditation. When I come in, it's like everything is different. And this is always the possibility for us. If we're saying, my life is miserable now, I'm not happy now, we always have that capacity to transform that into something wonderful. And as we begin to, as our consciousness begins to change, we begin to see more and more of the underlying divinity of things that's there. We begin to see things in a different way. Like I use an example, like you've got a rock sitting by the sidewalk. Every day 100 people go by that rock. It's just a rock. Then one day an artist is going by, and he looks at that rock, and he says, oh, that's so beautiful. It's got all different colors and veins and things, and what a beautiful thing. But the point is that all those people, they saw the same rock, but they didn't have the eyes to see the beauty. In the same way, we are living in actually a wonderful universe, a glorious universe, but we don't have the eyes to see it. You know, you have this vast universe, billions of galaxies, billions of stars, all kinds of plant life and animal life and people, you know, huge universe is there. But yet for most of us, 99% of our thought is about what's happening to me. You know, and we always say, well, do people like me? Don't they like me? Am I succeeding? Did I make a good impression? Like that. Well, in any situation, mostly what we're thinking about is me. And how am I doing in this situation? And what is the situation doing for me? And we look out at the universe and we say, what's the universe doing for me? When we begin to change that attitude and begin to kind of step back from things back into our true self, which is the true infinite self, then you begin to see how the whole universe can start to open up. You know, Joel Goldsmith, he's a kind of modernistic, he's a good friend of Swami Varadananda. He's got a book called Parentheses in Eternity, which is about mysticism. And one place he uses this example of if you had a little chicken inside its egg, that little chicken would think that egg was this entire universe. And that's all it knows, was what it had inside the egg. But then at some point, it begins to peck on the egg. And eventually, a little bit of light, there's a crack forming, a little bit of light starts to come through. And now suddenly, it's aware that there's something else there. And as it continues pecking on the egg, eventually it breaks it open. And then it discovers this whole vast barnyard is there. This whole vast world is there. In the same way, we're limited right now to basically what we experience at this moment, in this room, you know, in all particular individual lives. And that's all, for the most part, that's all we're aware of. But as we begin pecking on the egg of our mind and pecking on the egg of our consciousness, then you can actually begin to open up and you realize that there's this whole vast infinite consciousness there. That infinite consciousness ultimately is you. You're not the little chicken inside the egg. You're one, you know, you have the whole vast universe as your true nature. So this is what kind of the spiritual life is all about, is shifting in consciousness, changing the state of our consciousness from being very small, very narrow, very limited, going through good and bad and all these things, changing that state of consciousness to realizing that we're actually all the time one with God, with all that is. And that really that presence of God is our true being. We won't find God, we won't see God outside. Now when you have a guru, for example, when you see a guru, a great spiritual teacher, like Christ or like Buddha or like Ramakrishna, you look at that teacher and you know, he's the man of God, he's the embodiment of God. But actually, he is just a kind of a flow-through. Behind him is God. And because he's connected with God, because he's made contact with God, now God flows through him and it expresses itself. But actually, the guru, the real guru, the spiritual, is not the person that we see outside. It's the consciousness, which is flowing through him, but that very same consciousness is our own consciousness too. And so we see somebody outside, and we say, well, this is a great spiritual teacher. We get some inspiration, some insight, some help, you know. But ultimately, the source of what we're seeking is within our very own consciousness. And so this is what we're trying to achieve. And this is because that real self, as I said, is like is completely different than what we think ourselves to be. It's like normally it's like you're asleep, you're having a dream, and in that dream it may be a nightmare. A tiger may be chasing you. No matter what you do, you can't escape from the tiger. It's always behind you, and so forth. But then you wake up, and now suddenly the tiger's gone, the problem's gone, the worries are gone, all the threats are gone. And you realize, oh, this is real. It's like when we wake up from a dream, while we're sleeping, while we're dreaming, that dream is our real world. I mean, you think, oh, this is real. But then you wake up and you say, oh, that was just imagination. And it's all gone. In the same way, all of our problems, whether we're in hell, whether we're anywhere else, once a person wakes up, then all the problems are over. And then he knows the truth. He knows, yes, this is what I am. This is the reality. And the whole thing then is changed. And this is what we are. We're always in reality. We're always one with God. We're with God. We have all of God's kind of glory and power, wisdom, everything is all there within. But we have to wake up to it. Right now, we're kind of dreaming, our life dream, and we're so absorbed in that, and we're having good and bad, and we're struggling, a little bit with good and bad. But there comes a point of spiritual awakening where a person wakes up and realizes that just as he wakes up from a dream at night, in the same way you wake up from your waking state world and you realize, oh, I'm infinite spirit. There's nothing but God, nothing but spirit, and that's there. That's all there is. And so this is a kind of the transformation that ultimately will lead to kind of the high salvation. And once you've attained Brahman, there's nothing more to be attained. Because out of Brahman has come, the whole universe has come, and that whole universe is only, they say, a little tiny drop of Brahman. Brahman is vaster than anything we can conceive of, and the thing that makes it difficult too is that it simply it's hard to conceive of what it is, because it's different than what we ordinarily experience. So now we're covered. And I said we read the first couple, but let me read those again first. So the disciple, started out the disciple asked, by whose will is the mind drawn towards its objects? Who makes the vital breath, the first sign of life function? Ordained by whom do people utter words? Which God directs the eye, the ear, and the other organs? And the teacher says that it is Brahman. Brahman is the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, the speech of the speech, the breath of the breath, and the eye of the eye. Therefore the wise, giving up the notion that they are associated with these organs, depart from this world, in other words, renounce this world and become immortal. And so the commentary says that the real power, and behind the sense organs is the power of the sound. When the sound withdraws its power from them, as happens when a person dies, the sense organs cannot function, though they may be otherwise intact. The word precha literally means after death, but in the present context it means on giving up, on renouncing. So what is to be renounced? This apparent physical world, this world of appearance, of name, nama, and form, rupa. Why? Because only by renouncing this world of appearance can we attain that reality which is Brahman. The Upanishad also advises us, Tena Chaktina Bunchita. Sustain yourself through renunciation. Through renunciation, we are able to see Brahman underlying this world of sense experience, and we become immortal. This is what the Upanishad conveys by Precha Aloka Mita Bhavanti. Let us not be deluded by what we see around us. This sense would seem very real for us. The sense world seems very real to us, and it is also, no doubt, very attractive. But we must remain wise and discriminating. Dhira. Ordained by whom? Kineshitam, does this world appear to be real? It is ordained by Brahman, who is underlying this world. And because Brahman is behind this world, the world appears to be real. Because there is a rope lying on the ground, the superimposition of a snake on it can appear to be real. If you take away the rope, there will be no snake. Similarly, if you take away Brahman, there will be no world. So, in the classic example, the snake in the rope, the snake, that's false. That's a misperception, kind of a mistaken perception. But the rope is real. And this is, I mentioned that when somebody quoted Ramana Maharshi, one of the great sages of modern time, the famous verse, that I will tell you the truth in half a verse. Brahman is real, the world is unreal. And then Ramana Maharshi responded and said that the world as world is unreal, but the world as God is real. And this is, in other words, when we see a world, it appears to us a certain way through the senses, and so we say, yes, there's concrete people there, there's concrete objects, and so forth. But actually, what's there is actually Brahman, is actually God Himself. And this is, so it's not that there's nothing there, but that we misperceive it. We mistake what it is, not realizing what the underlying reality of it is. And there are actually kind of two approaches to truth. One is called yeti, not this, not this. This you find in Jnana Yoga. In other words, Brahman is not this. It's not the senses, it's not the sense objects, it's not the mind, it's not the reactions of the mind like that. The person goes on, is convincing, no, this isn't Brahman, and trying to get back to that original kind of consciousness. And this is the path, particularly in Jnana Yoga, of the person who's following the path of knowledge. The similar approach is called iti, meaning it is this, it is this. You know, for the person, the jnani is trying to deny, no, I'm not a human being at all. This world is not real at all. I'm the pure spirit. Which is very difficult for most people. But for the person who feels, okay, I am this body, I'm this person, this is what I am, but I feel there's something there. There's a God there. There's some higher reality or presence there. For that person, there's a path of iti, meaning it is this, it is this. In other words, we're in the world, we have jobs, we have activities and things to do, responsibilities. We take the world we're in, but instead of thinking, oh, this is a world made up of people who are different than me, and some of the people are good and I like them, some of the people are bad and I don't like them. Instead of reacting to everything in this way, you begin to smear God over everything. You begin to say, oh, this is actually God in this form. This is actually God in that form. And what begins to happen, is that the form becomes less important. Whether the person is nice or not nice, it becomes secondary to the presence of God there. And in other words, it develops what also the scriptures frequently is called same-sidedness. In other words, I look at you and I say, oh, you're very attractive, I like you. Or I look at you and I say, oh, you're very ugly, I don't like you at all. And like that, we were always reacting very personally and saying, oh, this person's good, this person's bad. But same-sidedness means that you begin to look at everything equally. And it's not just an indifference, no, but you're actually, when you begin to realize that before you is God in this particular form, even though it may be cranky, difficult for him, but it's God in that form, then your whole reaction, your whole attitude to his life begins to be changed. And then comes kind of a whole different experience of life. So part of you, we see the person as they appear. We see how they're dressed, we see how they behave, whether they're nice or not. But if a part of our mind, at the same time, is saying, oh, this is actually God in that form. And if you actually can kind of recognize that within yourself, you don't say, oh, you're God, or this or that, but if you actually kind of recognize that in your own mind, then you see all your experiences and relationships and all begin to become transformed. Because when you recognize the divinity in another person, you're recognizing that you actually have the same self. The very same self is in expression, as you, as them, as everybody else. And so gradually this attitude develops. everything becomes transformed. And this is kind of the ultimate goal in spiritual life, is to reach that point where you see God both within in your meditation, where you're not aware of the world, but also that you see God outside, when you're involved in the world. Sri Ramakrishna said, why should I see God only with my eyes closed? And so he would go into times, he'd go into samadhi, he wouldn't be aware of the world at all. But he would at other times come back to the samadhi, and when he was aware of the world, he was seeing the same God there, the same reality. And so like that, when you attain that knowledge of the oneness of your own nature as Brahman, as spirit, and of the spirit underlying everything, then you've attained everything. Otherwise you may go to heaven, but that will be only a temporary state, something which you individually will kind of enjoy for a while, and then come back. But when you begin to live in kind of the universal consciousness, the one consciousness, then you'll find that you've attained everything, and then there's no need for coming and going, because everything you are already. So this is the theme of this Upanishad, particularly Kena Upanishad, is this idea of by whom. By whom is this universe created? By whom do the senses operate? By whom does the mind operate? By whom do the ears hear? And so forth. And the answer, of course, is Brahman. Is that one reality which is actually the only thing that truly exists, is Brahman. Okay. So any questions? And right now, Swami Varadananda, he's down in Alabama right now. He'll come back, and none of our Swamis have ever been to that part of the country. So it's kind of breaking new ground. And so he'll be back there tomorrow night, and then on Sunday he'll do the talk on why we should meditate, and continuing that series of the yoga exercises. And today, Ganesh Chatterjee is holding. We're not doing the puja, but there are programs going on. And then in September, then we'll be starting the September schedule soon. Then Swami Varadananda will be giving the retreat at Ganges from September 26th to the 28th. Well, as most of you know, last Sunday we inaugurated our library. So libraries area members can take out books, and anybody else can browse the books. But it's open especially right after the Sunday service, from 12 to 12:30 roughly, but anytime anybody comes, one of the staff will help you. But it's available, it's down the first floor across from the bookstore. Om Asato Ma Sadhyaya Tamso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurvanam Amritam Gavaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O Lord, lead us from the real to the real. Lead us from darkness to light, and lead us from death to immortality. All peace,